I think it's a second one. Let's see. It says waiting. If I refresh this link, no, that's the replay. We do have some link that's going, but it says waiting for Awesemo DFS. I know we're live, I think. Oh, give the people what they want.
Exactly where I want to be.
Stick with us, guys. Our boy Tyler, our producer, unfortunately, his Wi-Fi crashed. Now we are sorting through the wreckage here, but have no fear. Tyler will get it sorted. And let's just get into the show. Stay tuned for an extra half hour of SuperDraft. I don't know where it cut off early. I'm not doing the whole plug again. Play on SuperDraft.io. Download SuperDraft. Please do that now. They are sponsoring this show. They are probably as ashamed as anybody would be of us and our production, but it happens sometimes, unfortunately, with remote studios and all of that. So please hang on for the extra half hour and go to SuperDraft.io or download SuperDraft the App Store and use the promo code Awesemo21, where they will match $50 on your deposit of $50 or more. So that's free money for you with the promo code Awesemo21. Terry, we lost some time here, so let's just get right into the top plays today. And we got to talk about Bruce Brown on DraftKings. He's going to be apparently a crucial play. Ownership just got an update as well, and a little bit less crucial now, it seems, on DraftKings, but we can talk about him anyway. Currently projected for over 20% ownership in our ownership projections at awesemo.com/join. Terry, how are you feeling about this very cheap Bruce Brown on DraftKings tonight, knowing that he'll get the minutes, or at least a shot at the minutes tonight, but not likely to get a lot of usage, definitely not likely to steal many possessions away from Kyrie or James Harden, even with no Kevin Durant?
Yeah, I mean, it's, he's a little bit better than having, probably you or me out there, I think, but he's mostly going to stand around and watch the other guys play. Maybe he'll create a little space for those two guys, but they're going to be playing staggered minutes off of one another. I expect that he's going to be, a third banana sitting, kind of in the corner and maybe, taking some threes and pulling down a couple rebounds. We've seen his production bounce a little bit on some rebounding. Alex was talking about it at the previous show, and I had taken note of it earlier in the day too when I was looking at his numbers. And there is some unexpected production there. So that would be kind of my concern, is that it's just like, we're getting a little bit of an uptick from some freakish result. And then looking at the actual fantasy point per minute production, he's at 0.81 this year. I had him at 0.84 from last year. So he's actually down a little bit. But really, the only thing that we're worried about is that he's the flat minimum on DraftKings at 3,000. So while it might not be something really comfortable, while it might not be we're going to toss you off this bridge if you don't get this pick right kind of a pick, I think it's safe enough at 3,000 at the dead minimum that we don't need very much from him, and he opens up everything else. He plays two positions on DK, so you can move him around to a lot of different spots. To your point, the ownership came down from earlier in the day. He's down by about 15%. I think he was around 50% earlier today. So he's at 35%. Still a little bit negative leverage on the ownership there, but very strong. He's leading on the optimal lineup percentage on our boom bust tool. So I think he's a very key piece from a value perspective today. There are other ways to build similar type lineups, but he's the guy who gets you the most space and the most savings.
And guys, we are on a new link, so help us out. Hit that like button here. Show your support for this channel generally, even when we hit these road bumps. We appreciate it a bunch here to make sure that people see this new version here with as opposed to the one that is now dead and going to be replaying the deeper dive, which honestly probably is good of a show, so that's fair for them. Anyway, the other causes here, the other parts really of the Nets, I'm curious your thoughts on, because in the most recent round of ownership that I'm popping into my sheet right now, looks like Kyrie Irving is taking a big jump today. And I do think out of these two guys, out of Kyrie and Harden, what we saw last game, Harden found his shot, or found his ability to force his shot more in a game with Durant, where Durant has really dominated the usage when these three stars have been available. But I think today, with no Durant, with Harden sort of having reasserted himself, and there's enough possessions, I think, to go around between Kyrie and Harden, I do think that Harden would be my preferred play. Kyrie a little bit cheaper, but going to be higher owned. I think that's going to firmly put me in the Harden camp. But Terry, if you had to choose between the two stars here, not including Bruce Brown, of course, who would it be for the Nets?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was getting to more Harden as well. He looks slightly better on both sites. They're both in play for me. On FanDuel, I was actually getting a lot of lineups there where they were coming up together. So I made a little bit of a group. I think it's okay to run them together. I don't love it from just I think one gets there, maybe the other doesn't quite get you as much as you need, but I think it's okay. But I didn't want to kill it completely, but I did make a little group to, nudge one guy down if I was getting the other. So it might be something for the people out there to consider. But yeah, I think it's Harden. He's going to be owned 37-ish%. So like right around his optimal lineup appearance rate. But you mentioned it. He took back some of his anticipated usage, remembered who he is and why they brought him there. And I think we're going to see that again. Nash has mentioned that he wants to get the ball rolling through his hands. The one thing I'd be not concerned about at all, really, but it's worth at least mentioning maybe, is that Nash, along with talking about that, did mention that as they go forward, he's going to want to give these guys a little bit less just in-game workload, so bring their minutes down a little bit as a trio. So maybe not starting tonight because it's only 2 of them out there, but we might see that going forward. Instead of playing like a 37 where we've got him projected, he comes in around like a 34, and they spread that out to like a TLC. So give somebody like that, or give a Bruce Brown an extra minute or 2 on the floor. So might be something that might shave a couple points off the top, but I don't think we concern ourselves with it. Not something we can really plan for. Harden looks like a very dominant play tonight from a boom perspective, from a raw points perspective. So really like him, and no issues going with Kyrie either.
So a couple of people in chat, and again, if we call you out or mention your chat, we're not being rude. We're not trying to tear you down here. Just trying to sort of dispel or at least address some of the concerns that people have when thinking about things, especially some of the casual players. And not a bandwagoner says Dort owns Harden. Mean Gene, great name, especially if we're referring to the late great Mean Gene Okerlund. Fading Harden, fear the dork. I presume he means the Dort, though. Either way, I think could apply for old Lugwentz. But I think individual defense in the playoffs, if you really want to worry about Dort, which is when we saw him have some of his success last year, I think that's fine. Like, I think that's something you can consider when you're on the shorter slates, when you're on, really when the games matter the most. But individual defense, never something we worry too much about in DFS, Terry. And I feel like I just want to give you the floor here to address it, because if that makes his ownership lower, if that makes Harden's ownership lower, fantastic. Because I think overrating individual defense is one of the biggest mistakes you can make especially when there is a guy like Kevin Durant out, just losing all his possessions is massive for both Harden and for Kyrie tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And people love narratives. People love to jump on narratives. And like you, I really like when people start overplaying, over-talking narratives around the industry. And that's a guy that, it's usually going to be on a popular guy. So if it keeps people off of somebody, I'm all for it. But I don't think it's not something I worry about. It's not something I really even look at, how a guy plays against another guy historically. I typically don't think the sample sizes are very large. So it's a lot of noise. It doesn't really mean anything. And if you just wanted to play the narrative versus narrative game for a guy like James Harden, don't you think that maybe that's going to piss him off if he's been shut down by this guy that nobody really knows all this time? And he's going to want to come out and score a bunch of points on him. So you can flip that on its head the other way. There's no way of really quantifying and predicting it, in at least in the way I do my stuff. So if somebody out there's got a better mousetrap that can account for it perfectly, then, by all means, put the factors that matter in there. I just don't think we can do it.
Yeah, and Cap 10 saying Dort the best shadow corner in the NBA. Yeah, that's sort of the way to look at it. Is that's not normally the way that the games break down. Even in the NFL, where you actually do see guys shadowing each other one-on-one. The way that teams scheme and try to get these guys out in the open is the part of the process here. And I think for Oklahoma City in particular, having one guy, it's not the same thing even as when you've seen Harden play Portland in the past, where they do trap him, they do force him. Denver does the same thing. Like, those are situations where maybe you worry a little bit more, but a gigantic total, no Kevin Durant. That's why I think you lean in on Harden today if people are going to be afraid of that one. Another injury affected spot tonight, Terry, that I think is going to pick up a lot of ownership according to our ownership projections at Awesemo.com. And again, those player projections today are free, so get them in case you missed on the stream that got cut off earlier. We do have the free projections. I'll drop the link in the chat. We also have a giveaway going on the @Awesemo_com Twitter handle, so you can get all the data for yourself. 5 free passes being given away on there if you guess who scores more points tonight between Luka Doncic or Nikola Jokic. But go check out the free projections. I just dropped the link into chat. Joe Ingles, a guy who went off the other day, his price is up a little bit. No Donovan Mitchell. He is still concussed. Ingles, had such a big day that it scares me a little bit going here, because I don't expect him to have a 40 fantasy point day necessarily. But at 4,700 on DraftKings, on FanDuel, I think it doesn't seem quite as much of a value, but 5,200 on FanDuel still in consideration for sure. I still like Ingles today. I'm going to be pretty heavy on him on DraftKings. Terry, give me your thoughts, and if there's any difference as well for you with Ingles on DraftKings versus FanDuel or versus SuperDraft.
Yeah, I think a little bit more on DK, where you're just picking up that price difference. You're picking up the positional eligibility. You can flex him around from small forward and shooting guard spots. So I really like what he does for you from that perspective. To your point, he's fine on FanDuel. He's kind of a mix and match option. 17% optimal lineup appearance rate as of my last update here. We saw him go off, the other day, like you mentioned, monster game. He projects well for us tonight. He's a guy who pops a little bit in my model, and usually that runs pretty consistently with Alex. So I've got a decent number on him, But just based on the way that other stuff filters around and just based on where he's getting owned for his price, I don't think he's going to come up a ton for me. He wasn't in crunching and he wasn't in my previous sort. I'm about to drop a new one in, so I'm curious to see where he comes up. I'll have some of them, but probably not as much as I would if he was like 4,700 like he is on DK. I just think he's another guy that you can slot him in for at least reliable production. He's not going to, most likely with that much usage in that many minutes, most likely not going to tank you. And he's got some upside ability. One of the higher boom score probabilities on the slate going by our boom bust tool at like a 36%. So definitely some upside for the money over there, and a very solid optimal lineup appearance rate on that tool too. And people aren't getting to him to a very crazy degree. So I think they're like you, not necessarily trusting that he's going to give it to us twice in a row. So I think I could get to Ingles over there.
I mean, here's the thing. I don't think that Ingles has the ceiling. I'm still going to be there heavy. Like right now, I'm actually, I'll do another sorting process when we get whatever the final news that's going to come during this hour. Certainly Norman Powell being questionable could be one thing that changes things a little bit for me.
Yeah,
but Ingles right now, I'm going to be double the field on DraftKings because I agree. I think he's not going to kill you. I do think the upside's there. People in the chat pointing out, yeah, he shot 7 for 11 from 3 last game. And that's a lot. Like, I don't expect him to do that again. As I said, I really don't expect him to get 40 fantasy points, but the 8 assists, the fact that he had that many possessions, the fact that he had the opportunity to shoot 11 threes. He took a little bit away from Bojan Bogdanovic in that game, but for the most part, there's opportunity to go around. I also don't expect Rudy Gobert to have a 30% usage rate this game. And I think for me, that just all leads to Ingles having a similar opportunity here. I do think he gets there in a different way. I don't think it's just straight, bombing threes, but the assist upside for him is good. He does get a pretty good jump in that rate as well. Any other Jazz players for you, Terry? I know people may be tempted to chase the Rudy Gobert game, and I think he projects well enough today to sort of justify it, but I'm going to be under the field there. I don't anticipate, this is not now a situation where all of a sudden Mitchell is out and Rudy Gobert becomes, I'm trying to even think, there really aren't a Christian Wood or DeMarcus Cousins. That's not really Rudy Gobert's game, taking a lot of shots at the rim. That's Gobert's game. And I just think this spot, like I would actually be more confident in Ingles getting to where he needs to than Gobert going absolutely completely crazy again, having a 30% usage rate and that massive ceiling. But you tell me, Terry, is that crazy? Or are you willing to go back to Gobert given that he's going to be chalky after that monster effort?
Across 999 lineups, because one of them was duped in that last crunch that I put together, he came up once. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be getting to much Rudy. I'm not sure exactly where it's going. Looks like some of it went to, this is on FanDuel, by the way. Some of it went to Steven Adams. I got to some Joel Embiid. I'm hoping to get to some more Mitch Robinson. I definitely got some Cody Zeller in there. So just some of the other names that have been popping up in a lot of center conversations. But Gobert, not a guy who comes up a ton for me. My model pushes him down slightly, so I usually get him a little bit lower than the site does. And unless he's really popping on the site, which he's not today, I usually don't end up getting to him. So just a 3.2% optimal lineup appearance rate on FanDuel. So not really for me on the singular center site. I think he's a little bit more in play over on DraftKings. He's only 7,500 over there, significantly cheaper. That's 1,200 cheaper. And you do get to put in multiple centers. So 21% boom score probability, still under 10% of the optimals though, and getting owned nearly double that. I think you can do better even for the lower price. So Rudy probably wouldn't be very much in my plans tonight. The other guy that comes up a little bit from that game from me, or from that team anyway, is Clarkson, who was coming up pretty much reliably with the public as well. I think everybody knows he's going to be seeing a fair amount of shots, taking his regular volume, and not afraid filling in for Donovan Mitchell there either to jack up some threes and really try and produce by scoring the ball. Getting 35% ownership on FanDuel, significantly less over on DK. So maybe it makes sense as a pivot option. 6,400 over on DK though is more expensive. So there's some give and take to that play on both sites. It's a little bit of a question mark, but I expect when I sort this out, I'm going to be over the field on Clarkson, which is fine. I get there when he's in that kind of a position. I don't love it because he burns me fairly often, but I think I'm going to be right back there again tonight.
Yeah, right now I'm with the field on Clarkson. It was hard for me to get above it just with the sorting process that I do. So, and I feel like I've said the phrase sorting process too much, but it's sort of, what we do on this channel is where we're always trying to tweak our how we're handling things, how we are processing things in DFS. And for me, that's sort of been my big change lately. That's been working out pretty well. It's also worth pointing out too, we don't know the status of Derek Favors yet. That did open up a little bit more minutes for Gobert. Right now, Awesemo has Gobert for 31 minutes, but if Favors is out, you probably give, let's say, 5 more minutes to Gobert Gobert, and that could change the equation around a little bit more where maybe becomes a bit more unavoidable at that point. But right now, to me, I think he's not somebody I'm trying to get crazy with. Powell is out, it seems. So that is news. Let me just double check to make sure. Yeah, ruled out Friday. George Hill, also no timetable for return. We'll see what the minutes update looks like here for Toronto. I was already getting a bunch of Pascal Siakam. I think if anything, this may open up more of the core guys for me, where I think I'll probably get a little bit more Lowry, maybe a little more Van Vliet, but Siakam, again, really heavy on for me. So I think that's where I'm seeing the benefit going. But Terry, who do you see getting minutes here from Toronto that could take a jump? Because we'll see what Awesemo's minutes projection looks like. And again, those projections are free today, but I don't know who would be the guy that I'm going to get a lot more of besides the core guys.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out on my stuff here if I change some minutes around where some of that's going to go, and I'm not entirely sure at this point.
People curious about Stanley Johnson, and I think maybe maybe that's the one.
Yeah, I was going to put some minutes on him. He was coming up a little bit before. Alex gave him a couple more minutes than I had, and he had come up to like a 19-ish, I think, point projection, or maybe it was like 17, 18 on FanDuel points the last time around. So I expect if Alex bumps in from 21 to like 26 on that news, I expect that's going to bring him up a lot. And at 3,900 on FanDuel, 3,900 on DraftKings, that's probably going to put him in play. I didn't get as much Norm Powell on that last run as I thought that I was going to after he came up. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. So I don't know how huge a difference it's going to make for me. But I do think that's a little bit of a change to the slate. He was one of those guys that was kind of in that mid-tier, though. So there are some direct replacements where it might not create a giant salary gap. And if we get a guy like Johnson who doesn't come up quite enough, or a guy maybe like a Terrence Davis who doesn't come up quite enough, who's also super cheap, maybe those guys just each come up a little bit and don't draw that huge value number. It might not actually change the shape of the slate completely. If it's Davis on DK, that's another $3,000 guy though.
I think, Terrence Davis, to me, as the flat minimum on DraftKings, probably on the cusp of playable. I'm with you. I think, it's going to depend how Awesemo's minutes look, but in the most recent run that I have in my sheet right now, Stanley Johnson, Awesemo had for 21 minutes and a 16.5 fantasy point projection. I would have given him a little bit more on that. But Stanley Johnson, I think, will be in the mix for me as one of the better value plays. And I don't know if he's going to kill off any Bruce Brown or any Teo Maledon I was getting. Might actually kill the Maledon a little bit more, though. Just a power forward straight away for Stanley. So that definitely makes him a little bit more limiting than some of the guys like Bruce Brown was guard and forward eligibility. And Maledon also has some dual position eligibility. So you're limited a little bit more with Stanley, but definitely makes some sense to get there. One other play, Terry, that is a value play that I think should come down a little bit as a result of this one, but Cody Zeller was fantastic against Indiana the other day, moved back into the starting lineup, had a really nice day, especially as value. His price hasn't gone up enough, so right now I'm looking to be pretty heavy on him, though it's going to depend on how this Toronto news kind of shifts things around for me. But how are you feeling about Cody Zeller as another value play going against Indiana, the exact same matchup we saw, which sometimes does work out, but sometimes there are adjustments made, and that guy maybe a little bit less good the second time around.
Yeah, I'm getting to a fair amount of them. I liked him a little bit better. He was coming up more for me, or I guess I should say my model and my numbers and the way I do things liked him a little better. And he was getting to him a little bit more early in the day. So I just think some of this value that's opened up is pushing some money around. It looks like I'm getting to more Embiid than I was earlier. So I think there's just more money to spend. But when I give bumps around to a couple different guys before I run this next version of the crunch, it might change that. It might push Zeller back up a little bit for me. So I like what he can do on the price. I think he's one of the more affordable options. 4,600 on FanDuel, 4,000 on DK. He's underpriced on both sites. For the guy that he is, the production we know that this guy can put up for us. Even in a 25-minute clip that Alex has in there for him on this last update of the Boom Bust that I'm looking at, he was looking pretty good. Very solid boom score rates, appearing in like 10% of the FanDuel optimals. And again, that's with a singular center. And then moving over to DK at that price, phenomenal price. He's in like 25% of the optimal lineup. So he was an unavoidable piece on that last update. With some of this emergent min-price value now, like you said, that might change up a little bit. So I'm going to drop in the new boom bust in just a sec. And I'll see how it changed for Alex before I get to my model and change it up over there. But I'd like to have, I think, more Clarkson than it looks like I'm getting to, or more Zeller rather, than it looks like I'm getting to right now. So let me give a couple things a push in here and see if I can get to that. And I mentioned it before, the other guy kind of in that salary range that I'd like to get to a little bit more and shake things up is Mitch Robinson. So I'm going to make a few changes and see what happens.
Yeah, Zeller, as Terry just mentioned, Awesemo gave him a 25-minute projection last game. He did get up to 30. It's hard to say that to really guarantee that he hits the ceiling in minutes again, but we're talking about a range of outcomes here. And I think if he projects this well 25 minutes, I'm willing to be pretty heavy on him. And I think that's going to be the case, though. I'll run my crunch and I'll update you guys as we always try to do on the show. Full disclosure, and sometimes these things change as we go. That's sort of the nature of the beast. Toronto, also, the projections have been updated, so you can check them for free yourself by you go to the site, check the tab up top, and you can find the projections. I'll drop a link, actually, too, because that shouldn't take more than a second. So here's a link in the chat. These are free today for all the sites. And Dan T in the chat saying, smash that like button. Yeah, smash that like button, guys. We need the likes now more than ever now that we've changed streams middle of the way through. But we got Toronto's projections here, and Chris Boucher takes a pretty decent jump. I think he's going to pop up more for me, but Stanley Johnson looks like decent value. Awesemo's projection for him, only 20.6, so not fantastic, but does get there. And Terrence Davis, I think the one that may come up a little bit more with Awesemo's projections, he's got him for 19.8, so that's a little bit less than Stanley Johnson for a pretty big price discount. Terry, you're running the stuff as we go here, but I just want to kind of put a bow on this Toronto news. Is there anything here that I guess now that we have the minutes projection that you're seeing a little bit more clearly?
Well, I'm seeing that that ding that you heard was it not opening for me when I'm trying to put it into my model. So just based on what you said, it sounds like that min price Davis over on DraftKings is probably going to start popping into some people's crunches on this next run as they update that. So that could be interesting for where that heads some of the direction of the slate with multiple min price guys who are viable on this in these constructions and playing different positions or the ability to flex them around to different spots. So I'm curious to see where that lands myself. And if I can get this thing to open, I'll give a little bit better of an update on that. But
yeah, and it is the halfway point of the show. Even when we change links, even when the timing's off, it is still money time here. So I'm going to flip the cap. And honestly, the projections are free today. Thank you, Tyler. Even when the Wi-Fi fails, Tyler, he never fails to hit that cash register.
The soundboard works.
But let me give a refresh up to the ownership projections. And again, you get these yourself. These are actually hot off the presses 18 seconds ago. This will count for everything, but make sure you get into awesemo.com/join yourself. All the ownership data, as well as the regular projections, those are free tonight, but normally you're going to have to pay for those. Get in at awesemo.com/join, the boom bust tool that Terry references often. Good way to kind of pare down your lineups, figure out the guys that you shouldn't be over on, that probably a lot of people are. Let's go to awesemo.com/join and do that and smash the like button here. I'm not asking you guys to 1,000 likes today, but that's the usual form here. So just pay it forward. Pay it forward for me giving you guys these top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel. Hitting that like button now. Number 1 on DraftKings is Joe Ingles, 35%. Cody Zeller, number 2 at 30%. Kyrie Irving, we talked about him. He's at a rounded up 24%. Kyle Lowry takes a jump as well, 23.4%. And Rudy Gobert, number 5 on DraftKings at 22%. On FanDuel, number 1, we have James Harden at 38%. On number 2, people dying to go back to Aaron Gordon, even though I think Evan Fournier might be the move once again, but 34% for Aaron Gordon. Jordan Clarkson, number 3 on FanDuel, 33%. Number 4, Kyle Lowry at 31.5%. And number 5, Kyrie Irving at 29%. Of course, get them all for yourself. All the ownership projections for every player on tonight's slate at awesemo.com/join. And Terry, you just heard the updated top 5 on FanDuel. So let's talk about that because I feel like we've kind of covered DraftKings didn't move around a bunch yet. None of these Stanley Johnsons of the world taking a huge jump up so far. But how are you feeling about the FanDuel top 5? And I have to ask you the question, are you willing to go back to Aaron Gordon Island after a lot of people get left holding that bag last time out?
Yeah, I mocked him in my intro to my column yesterday, and then I was forced to write about him again today as he's back on the board. He's right there. I think it's totally justifiable to be over the field on him again. It's a great price on a productive guy whose production is actually up this season now. It's one game does not kill his entire season or his entire career of productivity. And he's producing for us. I'm just jumping over to them now. He's up to 1.08 fantasy points per minute this year. Last year, he was 0.98. So that's a pretty decent sized jump for a guy we already kind of trusted. And his price is down. So I think that's definitely a guy who I want to get to as much as possible. I'm hoping that the fear and the narrative is keeping people away from him as well. We've got him at, I think what was the ownership number? It didn't populate in this last boom bust, so I don't have it. I've got a 0. But
the ownership on Aaron Gordon is at 34%.
Yeah, so you're going to be dealing with pretty significant negative leverage compared to the optimal, but it's one of those situations where it's so much optimal lineup appearance rate and a lock position where you've got to play two of them over on FanDuel that I think it's just one where we've got to ride it up over the field again and hope that he doesn't have one of those weird outlier games the wrong way and burn us.
Are you getting anybody else on Orlando? Because we talked about a second ago, and it is something that I feel like I've heard Josh mention on one of the shows, though I don't pay that close attention to Josh, just like all you guys out there. That spy, who knows what he's up to. But Evan Fournier has been a big beneficiary, arguably a bigger beneficiary of the Markelle Fultz injury on the year. Usage rate is actually above 27%. The assist rate takes a jump for him. Vooch as well takes the bigger jump. On DraftKings, I do think that Vooch and Fournier both project better. Terrence Ross further down the list, Aaron Gordon also further down the list on his DraftKings price, 7,100. Not doing it for me. But going against the Clippers, Terry, would you get any of these guys more on FanDuel, Vooch or Fournier, or would you get them on DraftKings? I feel like could be a game that's competitive, maybe a little bit sneaky here, even though 6-point dog at home, never the best.
Yeah, Vooch was a guy who was on my list a little bit of FanDuel centers. The center position on FanDuel was just so flat today. I couldn't even really figure out who I wanted to write about, so I just kind of wrote the whole position up a little bit and talked about it because we had, I think it was like 6 guys who were between 11% optimal and like 8% optimal. So it really just goes any which way that you want to go, and it's based on what you need at the time. So if you put together a lineup that's got 10,000 or whatever the price is on Embiid left, stick him in there. But if you need these savings and you got to go down to 9,200, I like Vukovic just as much. I think they're very, very similar plays, kind of across the board on FanDuel. So I was trying to track the ownership and the salaries. So that's what was getting me to a fair amount of Steven Adams. It was getting me to a little bit of Mitch Robinson. I'm hoping for more. I was getting to Zeller on the salary basis. And then I was getting to Embiid because of the other constructions having that savings left and dumping it into the center spot. So I think it's a very interesting position, but Vooch would be the answer for me. Fournier is a guy that I take what I get of him, pretty much all the time. I'm never wild about it, but he's a guy that we know can score, can put up fantasy points for us. Numbers are up 1.03 fantasy points per minute this year, up significantly from 0.90. Some of that is coming in these various absences with Fultz out and everything. But that's the situation they've got. So we've got to ride that. 6,300 kind of puts him in that mid-tier on FanDuel for me. 64 on DK. Not multi-position eligible either. Kind of hurts a little bit, but I think he's in play. He'd be a mix and match level kind of guy for me.
Also, we got some news here, which I'm curious to see how Awesemo handles it, but Naz Reid unlikely to play. Joel Embiid also on the other side, a game-tied decision. So that's something that you're going to have to watch here, which is a very important bit of news because could open up Tony Bradley, could also open up Dwight Howard, depending upon who starts there. Last game, Dwight Howard picked up the start, was terrible. Tony Bradley came in, started the second half, was a lot better play overall. And then Dwight mostly tried to salvage down the stretch, but Naz Reid being out potentially here, it's unlikely to play. He's not officially ruled out, but I think this could open up Ed Davis as minimum I can't even laugh say it's not a play I want to make, but he's minimum salary. And if he sees, I want to see what the minutes load that Awesemo gives him. You have to have somebody out there, whether you have Embiid in or not. I think you have to have one big of note. I guess you could go the other way, but then whoever's left, whether it be Embiid, whether it be Dwight, whether it be Tony Bradley, should feast if they go small. So I think Ed Davis looks like a viable play, Terry, but are you feeling minimum salary Ed Davis on a night where we have so much value, you might not need minimum salary Ed Davis?
I'm glad you said it. I do think he might be in play. I'm not sure if this last update caught that news. It looks like he's at 14 minutes, so probably not as far as picking up the update. But yeah, that's Naz is still in here actually for 25.
Yeah.
That's going to be a significant piece of information, what happens there. I agree with you. I think they're going to have to run him out there for at least like 20 minutes. But I think it really just kind of is an uptick to whichever of the bigs is going to be on the floor from the Philly side of things, really. So that's where I would put the stock in that. I probably wouldn't get to very much Ed Davis, if any at all, at the center spot on FanDuel, even at a 3,800. I just don't think he's going to bounce enough for me for projection and everything else. Dead minimum on DraftKings where you can move them around, use 2 of them, I guess. But we've got so many minimum price guys now on the slate that I don't know that you need to. But a big is kind of a guy I might trust more than like a min-priced wing who might just not get the ball. At least the big, can produce with rebounding, can produce with some defense. So he's not off the board if we're getting him up to 20, 22, 24 minutes.
Yeah, it's the most that he's played as a starter this year without Cat. Cat's still on the sidelines with his COVID-related issues, but he played 24 minutes. That's what I'm giving him right now. I'm also going to give a few to Jarrett Vanderbilt while we see how Awesemo handles the minutes. Because for me, as I talk about a lot on here, I run my own projections. Oh, we just got an update, so this might be it. I run my own projections, but I use Awesemo stat lines and then kind of fact check what I'm doing against it. And let's see. I'm excited to see where Ed Davis is at. This is 18.68 fantasy points. So a good value on paper. He only gave him 20 minutes though. Man, yeah, Ed Davis, I think looks kind of viable. I'm going to see who else takes a jump for Minnesota, but Terry, if you're going to give Ed Davis 20 minutes, I guess give me your official take. Now we have to process so much here. Terry and I talked before the show, like, hope it's a nice relaxing one. I feel really good about my exposures and all that. And now all of a sudden, just like in a blink of an eye, I'm now going to be playing a stupid amount of Ed Davis.
Yeah, that was like 6 slates ago at this point. I mean, my God, quickly things change. Just to the point. I mean, we've got to stay on top of news out there, guys. So this is why we do these shows. It's why we have the news god and get all this info out to you guys as quick as humanly possible. And if it seems like I'm stalling for time, I am, because I'm just going to bump Ed Davis there. I'm going to give him 22 minutes in my model here and see what happens. Let me take Naz Reid off the board, and I just need to change this to a no. One day I'll make this process a little bit less cumbersome. Ed Davis bounces in.
I'm giving him a couple more minutes than Osmo's giving him because I don't think he's going to pop up enough for me with 20, but my gut tells me he can get to 24. So I'm just going to say that as my take here. I never like going against the boss man. That's he's made millions of dollars while I'm here just panhandling for likes like an asshole.
Talking to me.
Yeah, talking to Josh's dad. Just fun. But no, Terry, give me your take
Josh's
here.
Dad on a Friday. You're cool.
Yeah, I think I think Ed Davis is going to be a little more popular for me than he might be for Awesemo.
Yeah, it sounds like I gave him 22. I kind of split the difference between you two guys, and he came up to 20.94 FanDuel points in my model, which it sounds like when I populate Alex's, he'll probably end up right in that same neighborhood. So probably not as on the board for me, and definitely, since it's going to be a FanDuel lineup, going to not be on the board as a singular center. And I think it makes sense based on giving him that many minutes as you are on 24, coming up a little bit more on DK like we talked about. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I just use 20 fantasy points as like a sort of a way station where that's sort of my, like, I don't want to consider very many guys under 20 fantasy points projected. That's just been one of my things recently. So if giving him the minutes at 24 gets him to over 20, that's sort of what I'm trying to get to. And and
that's something we talk about, on different shows and columns and everything. We always want to hunt those value plays, and it's probably the most important thing that we talk about, where you're getting those, those cheap plays that let you fit in these other spots. But after a point, you do need these guys to put up a certain amount of raw points, regardless of what their salary is. So 20 is a good cutoff for that. If you see a guy with like a 13-point raw point projection from us, he's probably not going to be a good play, regardless of the salary.
Yeah, and I think, target score-wise, normally the 5x plus 10 on DraftKings is a pretty good benchmark, and that's, sort of what I'm trying to get these guys within range of, so I can just make sure with my process that things come out the way they're supposed to. Let me see if there's been any ownership update here, as we're trying to do our own lineups. We're trying to make sure you guys have the best news possible, so we want to make sure that we're, giving you our accurate perspectives here. Just got an ownership update as well, and, let's see what Ed Davis is at here. Ed Davis on DraftKings, only 3% projected ownership in this run. So that is interesting to note.
Bags on Ed Davis Island. I love it.
And Stanley Johnson in this most recent run up to 22%. So Stanley Johnson now a well-represented value play.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the FanDuel one. It looked like I'm about to paste it in here. He jumped to the top of the board in FanDuel ownership, period.
It's funny because this slate is like, these are all guys that are just such trash, and it's a 10 gamer. And it's like, I'm now completely changing everything to make sure I'm getting Stanley Johnson and Terrence Davis and Ed, the Davis boys, Terrence and Ed.
And these are the kind of ones that I get to when I have more time to think about it, as it's like, say this happened 15 minutes after lock, and you've got that 45 minutes, that hour and 45 minutes to sit there and really think about these plays that you're changing all your lineups to make. And you had spent all day dialing everything in, and now you're going to late swap optimize everything around Stanley Johnson. But yeah, it makes sense a lot of the time, because it changes so much about the shape of the slate and how everything else fits together. It's not always about getting Stanley Johnson's production in your lineup. It's about getting the other guys that he allows you to open up. So it's an exercise, but it's usually worthwhile.
Usually. So it depends on the day, depends on the slate, depends how much Ed Davis you end up with in your life. Let's keep going through some other parts of this slate. I'm going to just pull up the ownership again to see if anybody moved around. The other Toronto guys, also, it's worth noting on DraftKings now taking a big jump. Going against Sacramento, it makes sense. Sacramento, one of the worst defensive efficiently teams in the league, or defensively efficient teams in the league in terms of their rating there. But Kyle Lowry now on the is a top 5 owned play on DraftKings. Van Vliet now a top 5 owned play. Pascal, Stanley Johnson not far behind. Terrence Davis at minimum salary also not far behind. On FanDuel, does seem like these guys also taking a pretty big jump. Siakam, Boucher in particular going up. Kyle Lowry still top owned. It's Stanley Johnson on FanDuel. Now the chalk of the day. So it's been a roller coaster, Terry, between the links dying and the actual lineups and all of that. But how are you handling the Raptors, knowing that this is now the chalk team of the day on FanDuel? Let's talk about that.
I will take the value guys as I get them. I'm trying to get back into Cruncher now and hopefully run a crunch at some point before this slate starts. But just having a little bit of data movement issues. But yeah, I'll take them as I get them for the role players between basically all of those guys. I'm not going to really try and push one or the other one up. The guys that I expect to get to and really hope to get to would be probably in order Lowry, Siakam, and then Van Vliet. I was getting a ton of Lowry earlier. I was getting a fair amount of Powell who came out. So I think maybe some of that shifts over to Van Vliet, maybe, but the price is higher on him. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to transition. And then I was actually wanting to get to more of Siakam. So I hope if he comes up that I'll pop a little bit more of him into my lineups with a higher projection as I run this next crunch, if I run this next crunch. So that's where I'm hoping it lands. If it's all into Lowry for me, that would be fine. I think he looks great on this spot.
All right, I'm going to jump over the premium Slack. We'll see what questions we have here while Terry and I both have to scramble to figure out the dumpster fire players we have to add in. Pedrito PR asking on FanDuel, Terry, would you want to go Aaron Gordon or Chris Boucher?
Probably Aaron Gordon, just because it's more reliable situation, more reliable minutes. I don't have the ownership differential in front of me. Unless it's a massive ownership, which I know Gordon was popular. Gordon's one of the more popular plays. Let me see where Boucher is in this last lineup. Boucher is, half is owned. Assuming that Alex's most recent projection is very close, you can kind of decide that one on ownership. Maybe take a peek at the optimal lineup percentage in our most recent update and go by that. I like both plays. I think Gordon is the more reliable if you're looking for floor, if you're looking for, all right, I need to get 35, 40 points out of a guy with upside. You need him to produce upside for a GPP winner. But to get you over a cash line, something like that, I would think Gordon's probably safer.
All right. And also my Excel just crashed, so I'm feeling fantastic as I was running things. This is one of those days on a Friday, guys. So if you want to show a little love for your favorite DFS hosts who are dying on the vine as we do a show, make sure you hit that like button. Out of this. and get ready to hear Terry have to fill 15 minutes on the stretch. Now we'll throw it back and forth so we can make sure we get all of our stuff. And it's a team effort here on Live Before Lock-In. And again, stay tuned for the extra half-hour super draft show we're doing. If we had a 7:30 lock for every site, it'd be smooth sailing right now. But on super draft, you actually do have one. So if you for some reason, if your lineups are going better than my process is right now, feel free to go to superdraft.io or download SuperDraft in the App Store, or just hang on with us after the live the lock time on FanDuel and DraftKings. We'll hang out with you guys and talk some super draft. Give you guys the promo code again, Awesemo 21, where you get a deposit match up to $50 on that site. Let's see. One question or one team that I feel like we haven't talked about at all that may be worth questioning a little bit is going to be the Wizards in this spot going against Atlanta. Bradley Beal, we've seen have some massive days recently, though. This team is now mostly fully stocked. Russell Westbrook also going to be back in, probably still, I would think, minutes limited somehow, even if we don't get an official news announcement about that. Has been playing his full allotment recently, but he does project pretty well. I think that he would be in consideration for me. Beal, I'm less likely to chase, especially with James Harden on DraftKings at that price point. But Terry, what are you getting in Washington, Atlanta? A spot that fantasy-wise, over-under-wise, all the stuff we look for, does look like a really appealing spot and one that's not as owned as you might think normally.
Yeah, I was hoping to get to a good amount of Beal. I like the spot for him. I love the production, leading the league in scoring this year, and not really seeing like a massive downturn in usage or anything like that. He was still over 30% usage playing alongside Russ. So I don't think there's going to be any real ding there. And, like you said, Russ probably not 100%. He's probably going to see a little bit of lesser minutes. I think with him being in the lineup does, and with the other guys, Rui and Davis Bertans coming back too, is kind of take basically everybody else off the board. All those value plays that we saw earlier in the week I think most of those guys are just not really playable, and I don't think we're going to get enough reliability out of Rui, out of Bertans, guys that we like to go to when they're in the lineup sometimes at the right price. I don't think we have enough reliability or know really what they're going to be doing tonight to go to them. So I think it would probably be the Beal show for me, pretty much.
We got a super chat here, which I think the question came in separately, asking Hardaway, Keldon Johnson, or Aldridge in the forward spot on DraftKings. I really didn't get to any of these guys today, so I think that's going to be one that for me, let me just pull up and see how these guys look. I think I would want to go Aldridge. Relative to his price, he looks like the best play. But Terry, do you agree on that?
Yeah, that was the one that popped into my head from what I'm remembering of the board earlier. Keldon wasn't looking great. He's a kid that I like to get to and have been getting to this year, but he wasn't looking great comparably to Aldridge specifically. I didn't have Hardaway really in my head, but I think out of those, I would just kind of go with the reliability of LMA.
All right, we got another super chat here. Let's see, DeJounte Murray or Fred VanVleet for a DK GPP. This is actually an interesting one because before I was getting a lot more Murray. I still have to actually run my crunch here to see what I'm getting. I think right now I would still favor Murray. I prefer Lowry out of the two guards there. So that's going to be my take. But Terry, how do you feel about that?
I agree. Most of my stuff is, as I've said, is geared toward FanDuel, and I was getting a good amount of them there. I think I would have been getting more of them on DK. So yeah, give me Murray in that situation. Not sure how the change would have affected VanVleet. Like I said before, just not having the opportunity to crunch it out and take a look at things. So I think just because I have more of it in my head, would go with Murray.
All right, and another question about Keldon Johnson. I'm not sure why exactly he's coming up so much for people, but let me just pull up real fast to see my Keldon Johnson, then I'll run my little final crunch here. But Keldon,
there wasn't any news on him or anything, right?
No, Keldon to me looks okay at his price point. I don't really see the reason to get there. He's 3% owned for a reason, but Keldon Johnson for you, I guess, any final thoughts? I don't want to deprive Corey of our finest Keldon Johnson thoughts.
Since we got multiple Keldon Johnson questions, let me pull them up in my model real quick, which does typically like him a little bit more than Awesemo's. So yeah, I have him projected more than Awesemo does. Alex has him at 28.4 fantasy points, and I have him at 28.83. So he's fine for 5,600. That's all right. You need him to get like 40 points for you tonight. I had, I think, a 425 target on this one. Might have been 420 target on this game. But you need a good score from him. 40 points. We've got him between both me and Alex around 7.5 probable of putting up that ceiling score for you. So he's okay. He's a mix and match piece, but nothing more.
All right. Let's see if there's any. God, please tell me there's no more news. It's gonna be bad. All right. Still no news about Joel Embiid. So that's one that we're gonna need to know. But I'm just making
sure. What time's that game?
Let's see.
Is it while we're still on talking about SuperDraft?
I believe it is
8 o'clock. All right. We'll have a half.
Yeah, so we'll have some time. I'm just making sure that I still get some of Maladon and some of these other guys. And I'm running what I hope is my final crunch so I can die after this show. And again, hit that like button, please, and stay tuned for the back half of the show. The back half hour, we'll be talking just SuperDraft. I'm curious your thoughts on Theo Maladon, by the way, because I think he was a value play that did seem interesting before. Now I'm not sure how much of him I'm going to get because of all these guys. Stanley Johnson, I'm running, and this crunch I'm running right now, at least relative to not sorting yet for ownership, coming up quite a bit. Did you get any Maladon? Do you think like guys like that? I think are interesting because when they're value earlier in the day and then they kind of fall off. Like he's still a decent value play to me. The usage rate's not going to be that high. I have some concerns about that, but against Brooklyn, this is kind of an ideal spot for a guy like Maladon to have some upside. No George Hill again. How are you feeling about him or any other value plays that you think could be good pivots to the guys that we've now talked about and figured out live on the show?
Kind of exactly what you said there. I like a value play like that where he was a value play early in the day. I didn't really love him earlier. It's like 0.6 something fantasy point per minute producer. The opportunity's there. It's a good spot, pace game. Not much defense can be played in that game at all. I like some of the other guys on that team a lot. I like SGA is in a great spot tonight. But I was getting some Maladon, and I think I mentioned to you before the show started that I was trying not to get to him. But with everything else on the board changing and really nothing changing about his opportunity, except that people might be flocking away from him to some of those other value spots, that makes him a little bit more intriguing for me. So I think I'm hoping that I pull a little bit more. I was getting him like, I think 12% was the last number I saw. So if I get him a little bit higher than that now, or at least around that, while people are flocking away from him, I'd be pretty good with that. It's going to be a surprise and definitely not where I thought I'd be. I don't love it because I don't trust the player and I definitely don't trust the production or the upside, but he's doesn't have to do a lot. He's another one of those guys who really isn't going to have to produce a tremendous amount for 3,600 on FanDuel, 3,400 over on DraftKings. So he's fine to maybe a little interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I think we're on the same page. Not somebody I wanted to get a lot of when I was getting a bunch of him before. I was not very happy with that outcome, but now I do think that he's a little bit more interesting. I'm also baffled by what I'm getting here. God, just all right. We're at the point where he's got to roll with it. About 6 minutes left to lock. A lot longer on SuperDraft, so a good reason to play over there and use your money more wisely than I'm going to be using it today. I can't. I'm terrified. I'm going to paste this in right now. I'll share with you guys my reaction live on the show to the painful, terrible lineups I'm going to have as a result of these changes and Excel crashing too. Like I'm not even sure what I have, in my data, which I'm terrified of.
It's just like version wise, like which save you're working off of even?
Yeah, like I don't know. Projection wise, I then just ran my sim to get a good read on that stuff. Honestly, might have been a better day to use a boom bust, but that's not how I do my sorting. All right, so I'm getting a lot of Pascal Siakam, a lot of Cody Zeller still, a good amount of Joe Ingles, though less than before. Mike Conley is now jumping up for me, which, okay, I guess. Lowry popping up. James Harden going to be a big play for me. DeJounte Murray came back down, which I think is kind of interesting. But and Ed Davis still not represented very highly with my sorting process. Just one lineup with Ed Davis for me.
Bullet dodged.
Oh, God, man. This is – I honestly I'm getting Aaron Baines. Like, I don't want any of these guys.
Cue the monster Ed Davis game now. Now that you talked him up, and he's not going to be in.
God, I am all right. I'm pasting this in. I'm getting my lineups in. Terry, if there are any questions in the Slack that you have time to pull, or if you're pulling yours too, then what are we going to do?
Yeah, I've got about half as many lineups crunched as I normally put into this thing, but I kind of got to just move them across. Right. Somebody earlier was asking, oh geez, who the hell was the play? Nope. I had a question for a second, but sorry, guys, it fell out of my head. Whoever asked if somebody was a good play and it wasn't Pascal Siakam, it was the other guy, Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal is kind of a meh play for me on FanDuel tonight. Wasn't really coming up. We've seen more from him with people coming back into that lineup. I don't think he's very much in play like other pieces of that lineup a little bit more.
I can take the lead a little here while you do your stuff. I got mine in. However terrible they may be. Iron Maiden asking, do you prefer Clarkson or Conley for a DK GPP? I would have thought Clarkson, but my exposures say Conley. So hope that does well for you. That's where my money.
For me, that would be Clarkson.
Yes. Thoughts on playing all three main Raptors in DK cash based on the ownership? I think that would be a fine move, though. I guess the main Raptors question is the one I would have not concern with, but would be curious about because to me, I feel like that would be. Let's see. Let me look at the ownership real fast to just double check. But I think the main ones in terms of ownership, like Stanley came down in the ownership now. So that's actually interesting. Oh, Jesus Christ. Why does everything have to be like this?
Have time to catch that update.
Let's see. Yeah, three main Raptors going to be owned. I mean, Kyle Lowry for cash seems smart. Siakam for cash, I think, seems smart. And yeah, and Van Vliet's got enough on him to go there. And I wouldn't hate going to 4 with Stanley, but Stanley's now, if he's going to be 15% owned on DraftKings, I think that you could probably not put him in a cash lineup and not feel too bad about it if, I don't know. Value-wise, though, he's still one of the higher on values. An either-or question from Ben Napple asking Trey and Keldon Johnson. Are we getting trolled by Keldon Johnson hives? Trey and Keldon Johnson or Harden and Dort for a DK single entry? For me, I guess that I like Trey a lot, so I think it would be Trey and the very popular Keldon Johnson.
I'll go with that one because isn't Dort guarding Harden and just playing two guys on the opposite sides of guarding each other just seems weird to me. It's not something I ever really thought about before, but it just seems like a strange one. I am getting to a lot more Harden than I am to Trey, though. Just to throw that out there.
Yeah, I was getting a lot of Trey. I'm still gonna be very heavy on Trey. So that's one thing that thankfully didn't change for me. Heavy Harden, heavy Lowry, heavy Trey, and heavy Mike Conley. Which all right.
Why days where I click the upload button before I look at the exposures that I get. That's always a good sign. How
much Bruce Brown did you end up with?
Doesn't look like. Oh no, you know what? He's not going to be on this list because of the junior on his name. This is the one spot I never fixed it. so he doesn't pop up when I actually try to search these exposures, which is makes things interesting. Let me see here. Bruce Brown. Let me just pop a junior on here. Oh, that isn't going to work.
Actually, I might do one more sort here. I got Bruce Brown came down a lot for me. Stanley came up a lot for me, but I'm going to do one more sort here since I think we now have enough time that I'm not bleeding from my eyeballs with the amount of Ed Davis I'm concerned I'll get.
Looks like I got 16% Bruce Brown when that last the ones that actually went in.
What a wild slate here.
Down
This
a lot from earlier.
Really ended up being chaotic. Stick with us, guys. We are going to hang out here. If we get the Joel Embiid news, we'll talk about that in addition to the rest relevant to SuperDraft. And I'm actually not going to have enough time to swap this. Let's see. Well, let's see real fast. Let me see if I can get one more.
Yeah, so my big concern as we go forward, and while we're talking, you guys will probably see this live because I'm sure we'll get it 15 seconds after the slate locks, is the Joel Embiid news. I've got a pretty decent share of Joel Embiid in my lineup, so that's going to be interesting to swap out because that's a huge swath of salary that's going to have to move around to some different positions, and you're losing a handful of interesting games to do that with. So I'm going to be very curious where that goes if we get that Embiid news and how that comes together. I like the fact that we've still got the Brooklyn game there, so I can probably get to a little bit more Harden with it. I expect that maybe some of it would go toward like a Luka or like a Porzingis out of that game. Maybe I get some more of the Clipper stars than I would have otherwise been. They're not really coming up for me very much now, but just with that much money to spend once we get into swaptimizing, I think those are going to be some of the only guys on the slate that are going to have that kind of salary to dump that into. So that'll be interesting.
All right, and we are locked on the main site. So right now, hang out with us. We'll be going through the SuperDraft slate, and I just got what I got. This is one of those times where you just got to take the loss and hope that the IRS doesn't look too closely when you write. No, let's talk about the SuperDraft slate. So first of all, go over to superdraft.io, download SuperDraft in the App Store, use the promo code Awesemo21, which will give you $50 free on your first deposit of $50 or more. Tonight they've got contests with $40K guaranteed, $10K guaranteed, and $5K guaranteed, along with a $20 entry where winner take all. It goes to satellite into their massive $1 million Super Bowl contest. So this is SuperDraft for you tonight, and we have the projections also free. I'll drop the link one more time. But go check this link and hit that like button too. Yeah, this has been really, honestly, I'm wondering too if at this point it was even worth it to change my exposures around. Where like I had some of the guys I wanted, and I got buyer's remorse, Terry.
That's it. That's when it's one of these chaotic slates. That's always where I end up. I'm just like watching the guys that I had in my lineups earlier today going off like crazy and saying like, I'm pretty sure I built that one earlier today. I saw that going in. That isn't in there now, but hey, guess who's got 7% Ed Davis in his FanDuel?
Hey, nice and cheap. How could you disagree? I'm curious what kind of play is Ed Davis on on SuperDraft. He does have a 2x multiplier. He still seems to be roughly the 50th ranked play, so not maybe a consideration unless you're doing 150 on SuperDraft. You probably still don't want Ed Davis.
I do like the multiplier. I mean, if he's at 2, if he's in play on the other side, I think he's got to at least be in consideration.
Man, if that Excel spreadsheet didn't crash, I would have been feeling much better about how this went. Instead, just one of those shrug emoji type days. But thankfully on SuperDraft, we can all play right now. And we'll build a lineup, I think, here. Let me see if I can get this lobby back up for SuperDraft, as I think everything crashed. Wait. Okay, there we go. Got SuperDraft open here. So we'll build a SuperDraft lineup. We'll talk through some of these top plays. Go ahead, Terry. You have something you want?
Oh no, I was just chiming in with cool. Sounds like fun.
All right. Let's see. Pete V with $20 drink on me for you both. You're going to need it. Thanks. Shout out to Pete V for the super chat there. Hopefully, unfortunately, it takes a while for these super drafts to matriculate and the super chats to matriculate so we can buy alcohol. But have no fear. I will be knee deep in a bottle of wine after this one.
Right. I just buy my alcohol just with the assumption that the SuperDraft money is coming at some point.
All right, so the top play, according to Awesemo's projections on SuperDraft today, does look like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a 1.45x multiplier on him. That's sort of the one thing with SuperDraft to keep in mind here. The ownership is very hard to pin down because you can play any players you want. That's sort of the benefit, and also can be a bit of the challenge with some of these slates where you're trying to figure out where the field's going to go. To me, with Shai, just how Shai is and sort of the I would say the inherent risk of him, but just he can disappear from games. You can see your Maladons, you can see your Baisleys of the world. You can see really even a Diallo or Dort have a big upside day. I would actually be willing to move away from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even though he's really easily the top projected play on SuperDraft today. I just feel like because he's a top projected play, because our projections are free, candidly, I think that's sort of what we saw with another sponsored show the other day where the top prop doesn't go off, everybody's on it, then a lot of the field's dead. I think for me, Shai would be one guy I'd be willing to at least get under the field on if you're playing a bunch of lineups, if you're playing a single. I just think I wouldn't play him. But Terry, how do you feel about Shai here with a big multiplier, 1.45x on him, and still a nice projection, but one you could probably find elsewhere, I think.
Yeah, that's how I like to think through these kind of contests where it's not necessarily salary based. It's not necessarily items of different size that we're trying to pack into the suitcase. It is, but it's from a different angle, I guess, with the multipliers, right? So I think in this kind of a contest, we can look for a guy who plays the same position, who has somewhat of a similar multiplier that we can swap in there and just make a different play and potentially even see some upside out of it. Like a guy, the third ranked Jordan Clarkson, even if you're just swapping down to him as your first guard click. You're going up to a 1.7. Now, we're not saying he's going to score the same amount of fantasy points in a raw point perspective, but you're getting to a higher multiplier. You're getting to a guy that we expect to be on the floor for a similar amount of minutes and see his regular amount of usage and a decent uptick possibly with Mitchell off the floor if they go to him a little bit more. So I think he's very much in play. He would probably be somebody that a lot of people would click to alongside of Shai. So if you're skipping Shai, making him your first click, and then going somewhere completely different, you're just setting a foot on a very different starting point than a lot of other people. And you can get to some interesting things with the way these multipliers come together, that it's very different from how you put together a lineup on other sites. So yeah, I don't ever really mind skipping any of these individual plays, from that perspective, from a just let me try and get very different from a field where we don't have a great idea of what's going to be on, what's the most obvious looking one, and how can I get away from it? How can I replace it?
And similarly, one guy that I do like a lot, and we've talked about him today, I'm going to be heavy on him on DraftKings. I think on FanDuel, he's also a very popular play. And I think you can maybe make the case to move away also a little bit more. I'd still want to get a good amount if you're putting multiple lineups in, but James Harden projects very well. 61 fantasy points projected here with a 1.05x multiplier. And the issue for me with Harden is he's not really getting a discount on SuperDraft, where the 1.05x, like other guys that tonight include Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic has a 1.05x. It's basically what it means to be a stud play. To me with Harden, like I like him. I think he projects well today, but I worry that, like the next play after him is Jordan Clarkson with a 1.7x multiplier. Like I would rather, I think from a lineup building standpoint, I would build around Jordan Clarkson. I probably wouldn't want to build around Harden necessarily. I think whatever you get seems fine. But how do you feel about that approach here? Would you be willing to move away from Harden too, given a low multiplier and the fact that we have some guys who are in better spots now with much higher multipliers?
Yeah, I think just instinctually, I tend to do that just as I click through these things by hand, and I think the optimizers follow that a little bit as you try and play it that way. A guy like Harden, he's gonna probably go off for a big fantasy score, but we're worried about the multiplier on this site. And to your point, with a 1.05, you're not really getting anything as far as an uptick in if he goes off, you're only getting the game that he had. So it sounds ridiculous to talk about Harden and Clarkson in the same sentence. But when you look at their projected points off the multiplier, you're talking about a 1 point difference where Harden's going to be a much more popular play, I think, just on name recognition alone. People are going to go to James Harden before they go to Jordan Clarkson. That could be a mistake on this site just because of the way that those multipliers work. It's a very similar projection kind of a play. So those are the kinds of things that we have to think about. And, again, where it's somewhat unpredictable ownership and people are going off of a little bit of name recognition, a little bit of star value, I think it makes sense to go more toward those heavier multiplier mid-range type of plays. And Clarkson certainly fits that bill.
And here's an interesting thought from Keep Dreamin' Entertainment. Why are we talking about Harden projections? He says that in quotation marks, like you never watched basketball. I really do think that there is something to the eye test. Look, I watch basketball. I know that there are many players out there who also win a lot in NFL and NBA and MLB without ever watching a game. I think there's value in that, but also I think there's value in thinking about it the right way, which is that a median projection is a guy's middle outcome. That's what you're expecting to happen based upon Vegas totals, based upon, the situation like tonight with no Kevin Durant. That certainly is one way for Harden and Kyrie. Yeah, like that's what you're looking at overall. And on SuperDraft or on the other sites, you're still comparing it to salary. On DraftKings, I like his salary with a 1.05x multiplier. Like, he's going to shoot a lot, or at least theoretically should be shooting a lot. It's not really a matter of like, oh, I love this guy. Like, I know James Harden, I want to play him. It's just, what's the ownership? What's the value relative to everything? And I think that's the way to think about it. Like, that's really one of the big mistakes players make, especially if you're casual, you're not following Awesemo's projections, you're not following all the data. Terry, I don't know if you have any thoughts here. Like, I'm not trying to rip anybody apart. I'm very zen today after I've ripped my own lineups apart so handily on the show. But I do think it's worth pointing out about, because like, I know basketball. I also very much rely on projections, because that's sort of the whole point of the game.
Yeah, I know basketball. I watch basketball a significant amount of games. I live in North Jersey, so the Nets are just on television for me. I can flip to the game. I don't even need a special package to watch them. So I've seen Harden play in this rotation. I've seen some questionable usage. I've seen some, not really sure how this team's playing together yet. So just on the eye test alone, if you wanted to go that route, which I never do, I still don't love it. Yeah, he's James Harden, but he's James Harden in a new situation that's kind of unpredictable. Even with Kevin Durant off the floor, we expect that he's going to take most of the usage, and that's what we're putting into our numbers. But we don't know that. So I don't put much credence in that in general, and I don't put much credence in the specific for this one. Going back to the general nature of things, I don't talk about what I see on the court when I watch a basketball game when I'm talking about fantasy points, because the projections are watching, a couple hundred to a couple thousand games for all of these players at the same time for me. It takes all of that stuff into account. It takes everything that Las Vegas sees into account. There are much, much smarter people in the world doing all this stuff and putting all this together, and then just, math works. So the way that these things come together between minutes and usage it's all percentage, it's all numbers and math. So when you multiply these things out, it's just is what it is. So you can take the names off the jerseys. I do not care who the players are. I would flat play it blind if I just had the projections. I would seriously just play a slate with the projections and the salary data with no player names whatsoever and not care at all who the player was.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
no,
honestly, there's a lot of confirmation bias that goes on too, which I think a lot of people battle, and I've certainly battled myself too. I know when I first started Awesemo, that was a big part of my process, really learning to trust the data and trying to accentuate those things with the points that I know. Like, I do track, where guys are giving up shots, where teams are giving up shots. Like, I do track some of those things, but I don't think it's not a core part of my process, because that's just the main thing here. So, and he took it well, and keep dreaming, handled it classily in the chat. I appreciate the responses, even if you do disagree. Like, that's sort of what it's about here. Yeah, but I just know a lot of times here, there's, I would say, even a machismo thing with a lot of dudes who we get in this YouTube chat, where it's like, oh yeah, like, I know the sport. Like, why do I need projections? It's like, yeah, you know the sport, but do you know every player on the 10-game slate intricately? And I think that's sort of the question here.
And again, how something like an Ed Davis coming in and getting 6 more minutes than we originally had him projected for. 6 minutes to Ed Davis. You mentioned that to 99% of people out there who are just casually entering DFS lineups. You're like, oh, that's not going to change anything in my lineup. That changed the entire slate, right? Yeah. Ed Davis went from totally irrelevant to he's in 7% of my 150 lineups now, and I didn't even want to play him. So it's just process drives these things and drives you toward the correct decisions. And yeah, it's, I'm glad the person took the response as well. And it's all look, to a degree, a matter of conjecture, game theory. Yes, some of this stuff can be proven out with math and we can show it to you. But yeah, there's a little bit of, this is our philosophy. This is how we approach it kind of discussion to things. So yeah, when we answer these questions, guys, we're always doing it in good spirits. And a lot of the time I'm talking to the audience at large who may not know as much as the person who answered the question. So we're never attacking the person who answered the question to that point. One last point on that nature of question. When you multiply it out with the possibilities, taking into account how many combinations of each guy at each position, and you actually do the formula, on most of these slates, particularly when you get to the 10-game range, you're talking about literally billions of lineup combinations that you could potentially put together. You're not going to be able to do it as well as the optimizers can do it. You're not going to be able to do it as well without the projections, without the numbers, without seeing all this stuff. So it just lifts you up just by virtue of process and by virtue of having math on your side, if nothing else. So I know it's tough to accept, but the numbers do know this better than we do.
We also got some news that Lonzo Ball will start. So just FYI, in case anybody was worrying. And apparently the wind seemed to be blowing towards Embiid playing because he went through shoot around. But one we'll keep an eye on here. And of course, pay attention. That's, as Terry said earlier, that's an 8 p.m. lock. So you'll have time to figure that out on all the sites you're playing on, including SuperDraft, who does lock in about 15 minutes here. And let me see, still a good amount of entries available here. I don't know if we're going to overlay or not. We'll see how the last few minutes funnel here with SuperDraft. I think one thing go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to call out a play that I thought was interesting, but it sounded like you had a transition there. So.
Oh yeah, no, I want to transition real fast to actually back to the Harden thing because but somebody else pointed out in the YouTube chat, like, yeah, Harden is still one of the top plays on the slate, but because of the way SuperDraft works, like Harden, according to Awesemo's projection, which are still free today. So actually, let me drop the link one more time there. You can see the SuperDraft projections along with the NBA, excuse me, the FanDuel, the DraftKings ones for NBA today. They're all free, but on SuperDraft, you can see sort of why the argument could be made. Like in real life, or in, I guess, with normal scoring, base fantasy points is what the column says here from Awesemo. It's a 58.4 projection for James Harden, which is, I think, actually the highest overall on the slate of all the games, whether even including the games that aren't on SuperDraft. But then you go down a little bit, and Jordan Clarkson only has a 35.4 base projection. But because of that 1.7x multiplier, the SuperDraft projection for Harden becomes 61.3, and for Clarkson it becomes 60.2. So that's why these guys are basically the same play on SuperDraft, is because with the multiplier format, they become a very similar play. And if Clarkson somehow goes off, like if he puts up, like, what did he have the other day? He had 40 something. I'm trying to remember what offhand, but let me just.
I think it was something that, but I mean, we've seen him hit ceiling scores several times in the past. It wouldn't be something totally shocking if he was to do it.
Yeah, so he put up 21 shots last time, same matchup against Dallas, had 44.75 fantasy points. So then if you're saying Harden hits his median projection, normally that's going to make you happy. On SuperDraft, if Jordan Clarkson exceeds the median projection and just does what he did last game, even if he does 4 points worse, we're talking about 5 points above his median projection, which you then have to add that 1.7x multiplier to. And that's how a guy like Clarkson quickly does become better than Harden. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind when you're playing on SuperDraft. I wouldn't say it's a trap. It's sort of, the beauty of SuperDraft, the value and the opportunity to play any of the guys you want. But there aren't a lot of lineups that win where it's like Harden, Luka, trying to Jokic. Like, those aren't the lineups to win. It's like Harden, Luka, Jordan Clarkson, because that's sort of what the whole opportunity cost here is on SuperDraft.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example of it. Just, those two guys next to each other. Like I said, they're guys that you would never in any universe, when you're just talking about basketball on the court, talk about in the same breath as being remotely close to each other as shooting guards. But in this case, with this multiplier, convention to how they score things, totally in play. And it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, if he scores, 2 or 3 extra fantasy points, once you start kicking it with that 1.7 multiplier, that racks up really, really quickly. And all of a sudden he's having a much better night. So it's there. It's in play. The guy I was going to throw out there that I think is kind of interesting, that might not be on a lot of people's boards with Naz Reid coming out of the game, is Jared Vanderbilt, who we talked about on the other sites. I think here with a 1.95, he's really in play. I think he looks super interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's got a 30-point raw projection, according to Awesemo here. And Vanderbilt, another guy too, I think kind of the same logic as Clarkson. There's a pathway for him to actually have that outlier day at a 1.95x multiplier. And it's something to keep in mind with SuperDraft. They sort of deliberately keep the multiplier soft. So, if you're tapping a lot of these guys, like Jeremy Grant's not on today's slate, but Jeremy Grant's somebody that has, I think, been in a 1.7x, 1.65x multiplier for a while. And if you play on SuperDraft more frequently, whether you're using that promo code Awesemo21 to get your $50 deposit match on there or not, you are going to see a lot of these guys be, quality plays night in and night out. So Vanderbilt, I agree. Actually, let's build a little lineup here for the final 15 minutes, and I'll put. I'm with you. I think Vanderbilt would be one guy I'd put in right away. And would you agree with me that Clarkson should be somebody we should put in from the jump too?
I like it. I think so.
All right, let me put Clarkson in. Clarkson is a guard on there. The positions too, you got your 3 guards, you got 3 forwards, and then 1 center. And that's the way that SuperDraft does their things. And let me put in Vanderbilt.
So in the interest of maybe not wanting to jump all the way to D'Angelo Russell, Kyrie, we could talk about Luka maybe at 105 for one of our other guard spots, or like a Fred VanVleet. But do we maybe want to talk about deciding between SGA and James Harden as the other guard coming next to Clarkson from off the top? It might not make sense to skip them both off the top.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I gave my take really. Like, I think that because Shea is going to be going to project a little bit better because of, with our free projections, he does project as a top play. I think I would be more inclined to go to Harden personally. And, for all the reasons, we all know what playing Shea is like, but even with a 1.45x multiplier, I don't feel a ton of love for playing Shea. And if he goes off, my bad, but I'd be more comfortable going to Harden.
So that's one where I might, and it might be overthinking it, just, working it through in my head as far as, gaming it out. I think maybe that's a spot where if somebody makes the same decision, all right, I'm going to put Jordan Clarkson and Jared Vanderbilt, say they're working on here and they see those multipliers, hey, those guys look good. The most likely guy out of the two guys off the top, I think that they're going to click, despite what the projection's saying. It kind of ties back into what we were just talking about with the narratives and just watching games, I think, is James Harden. So if we want to get maybe further afield and pick up some projection, I think maybe SGA is the play just from that. And again, it might be over gaming it, but that's the kind of way I approach this is, all right, what's the next click that person's most likely going to make? And I think it would probably be on Harden before SGA if we take salary out of the equation like this.
Yeah, I think that's a fair perspective. And that's sort of, the game theory here that part of why SuperDraft has still a bit of an edge to unearth besides the deposit bonuses with that promo code Awesemo21 is just because, people haven't figured out the right approach. And I think that's actually a good way to look at it. I still don't love Shea. I'm still reluctant to walk into the Shea buzzsaw, but going against Brooklyn, it does seem like there would be some logic in going there. And a 1.45x multiplier for Shea versus 1.05 for Harden, you're probably not getting enough juice on Harden to make it worthwhile. So I'll put Shea in. So right now we have Clarkson and Shea along with Jared Vanderbilt on the forward spot. Let's see.
Well on our way to building a 0 scoring lineup.
One that all these guys are going to end up not playing somehow. No,
find us at the bottom of the standings, everybody.
So another guy that I feel comfortable with going at forward would be Chris Boucher for some of the reasons we talked about. Nice boost here. Going at Sacramento is going to be a good spot for really anybody, but because we have those absences with no Powell, I feel like that's sort of where I would feel comfortable going with Boucher. But do you have any reason why you might protest and putting Chris Boucher in at forward?
No, he probably would have been my next name off the top too. I think that makes a ton of sense.
All right, and then. What did Tyler send us? I know Tyler. It's funny because Tyler has to look at us while I don't read his chat. Say lineup and I'll pull it up. Oh yeah. I'm just building Tyler. I'm building in the SuperDraft lobby, so just put in whatever. But so far, if you want to pull it up, I have Clarkson, Shea, Vanderbilt, and Boucher in the lineup. All right, there you go. So you're good. You were actually very ahead of me, and I repeated it for no reason. That's. Okay, good team effort here. Thanks. Tyler's too good. That's the issue. Nicholas saying, no one play SGA. Keep that going. He's got 80% on SuperDraft. Yeah, honestly, I actually might have initially just fallen into the trap here that I think does hurt people sometimes when playing SuperDraft is that, you sometimes carry your biases from the other side over, and a 1.45x for a guy like Shea, just given the upside, I think does have a little more appeal than it would.
A guy with the ball in his hands who's going to be going up against no defense whatsoever, really, in a pretty good tempo game. I think he could definitely come out and have that Shea game, but I think there's certainly upside there for us. And when we were talking about it, we both said it a couple times. We don't like to play, we're not comfortable. That's exactly what we want to be looking for because that's what everybody else out there in the world is thinking, and probably to a bigger degree. That's what I like about this. It kind of gets into like that showdown mentality of just thinking out, all right, if this person's putting that guy in their captain, they're going to make this click next. This person's clicking on this guy first, he's going to make this click next. So I like thinking through those things and, kind of getting into the psychology of just how people think about putting lineups together.
Also, God bless Cody Zeller for going off again. And also, I'm not a religious man, so I'm saying that I'm finding some sort of religion through Cody Zeller, who having a nice day once again. I have 72%. The field seems like they only have 45, so I feel good about that.
Sweet.
No Cody Zeller on SuperDraft, though, so don't go relying on him there. You can't get my Cody Zeller on SuperDraft today, unfortunately for you guys. But let's see here. We got to pick another guard here. So we got some options. You mentioned D'Angelo Russell. I'm actually very intrigued by Russell, even on DraftKings today. Didn't get a lot, but I'm going to be above the field on him because I do think the spot against Philadelphia has some room to exploit. And if we want to talk about individual matchups, Ben Simmons, a guy to worry about, but I really don't believe that he'll be on Russell for this spot. So that's something too that, doesn't really matter, but maybe matters a little to you guys out there. A nice projection on him, a 1.45x multiplier. I think Russell's the only way they stay in this game now, and I think also a little more usage with no Nas Reed in there. So to me, Russell looks like a real solid play.
Yeah, I think with the little kicker of usage that you mentioned at the end there, I think that definitely puts him over the top for me, just as compared to looking at some of these other guards. The other guys in play, from that portion of the board would be Kyrie at a 115, Luka at a 105. I think the next most viable guy who's kind of a direct comparison would be Van Vliet at 135. Either way, we're going with a second Raptor or a second guy from Minnesota. So, we don't really lose anything from doubling up on that. But it would be something to watch going forward with maybe, not building a third guy from one of those teams in, like maybe not get to Siakam also if we go the Van Vliet route. But I think that Russell's probably the play here.
All right, so let's put D'Angelo Russell in. I think that's I would like to go to a Lowry or all those, but let me see what's Lowry's multiplier, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, actually,
Lowry only a 1.3. Like I think I'd rather have Russell with his boost here. Like yeah, that's another one of those plays. Like again, I would mentally just go like, yeah, put Lowry in, but on SuperDraft, not enough of a boost I think to get him there. Even though in real life, like yeah, he's in a fantastic spot.
Yeah, but had to scroll down just going by Awesemo's projections into the mid 20s. It looks like to even find him on the board, late 20s really. So yeah, that's not where I expected to see him, but it's all driven off of what that multiplier is that they assign him. So it makes sense.
So the next highest projected forward is going to be Brandon Ingram, and I think I'm willing to get a little bit away from that spot. So this is one where I might be inclined. We have Rashawn Holmes is another highly projected forward who probably won't occur for a lot of people out there, but he's got a 1.65x on SuperDraft. I think I would still be more inclined to go down to Pascal. And this is one where I think we're close enough within range where Brandon Ingram's projection on SuperDraft, 57.3, Pascal's projection, 55.6. I think people will plug in Ingram because he's a safe play, but I feel like there's more of a ceiling to Siakam. Terry, if you had to choose, who do you want to go at forward here between Ingram and Siakam?
I think on that one, I would probably trust Alex and go with Ingram.
I guess you are getting away from another Raptor, so that could be a positive.
I think I would want to do that, and I think it just playing off of the 1.4 there, as opposed to the 1.35, you're gaining a little bit. It's not a gigantic difference, but that 0.5 kicker could make or 0.05 could end up making the difference if it really comes down to things. And they both put up reasonable games. They're projected pretty similarly, so I think that might make enough difference where I could get to Ingram. He's not a guy I love to get to, not a guy I trust. But the other thing I was looking at is just kind of how much was he coming up for the other sites. And I don't think he was super buzzy today as far as he was a guy who was in play, but I don't remember him really, trending all that much in conversations and wasn't coming up a ton in my lineups. So I think just might not be at the front of people's brains as they're making their lineup. So again, just another, thought about maybe clicking somebody different at a kind of a similar projection, similar multiplier.
Okay. No, I think that's fair. So yeah, well, let's go Brandon Ingram. And I think too, there's a little bit of logic where, he is somebody who really has to keep the Pelicans in this game. Didn't maybe have to do that against Washington the other night. And he still had a fantastic game where that did become, thankfully for me, the Ingram-Beal duel that I was hoping for. But Ingram, is a good shot creator, has had the assist rate up a little bit. So I'll defer here. We go Ingram. And now we have to figure out our center spot. And this is one where I think I'd be willing to go a little more chalky and maybe not get weird at center. I think I would go Jokic and just hope that he has a ceiling day here, a 1.05x multiplier on him. But if we don't go to him, I think we have to go down a bit. Like you'd have to go to Rudy Gobert, who maybe a little chasey, 1.35x multiplier for him. I feel like Jokic, to me, out of all these guys at center, I think it'd be the one that I feel most comfortable with. How about you?
I didn't come all this way building in guys with 1.45s and things like that to not play a 1.05 Jokic when we got here. So yeah, give me all the Jokic we can handle in these lineups. This is definitely the play.
All right. So Tyler, if you could pull that final lineup on the screen, there's a freebie for you that we built with love here on the show, and you could see it. If Tyler puts, there we go. There we go. Tyler's got it. He's on the ball. We got Vanderbilt, we got Boucher, we got Ingram, we got Jokic, and then the guards, Clarkson, Shea, and Russell. Here's my concern, and it's sort of still, I don't play a ton on SuperDraft, so that's sort of one of the things that I need to bridge the gap on a little bit more, especially on these later shows later slate locks where we can actually get lineups in. Like it feels risky to have like these guards, I think, where you are going down a little bit in terms of security, in terms of safety. But I think for a tournament lineup, like I think this actually does have a good amount of upside and does sort of play into the SuperDraft theme a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's, I like to think about it maybe in terms of, looking at the multiplier kind of as we look at like the optimal lineup appearance rate or the boom percentage, one of those, rate-based stats that we look at or rate-based metrics that we look at that work off of everything, that take into account ownership, upside, ceiling, all those different things. That's kind of the work that the multiplier is doing in a way. So when we look at that lineup, that's kind of the lineup that we just built. Yeah, it might not have all the chalkiest names off the top with safe floors and superstar level production, but I kind of like the lineup that we built there. I think that could be an interesting one.
Yeah, honestly, we should pull a Jade Tanner and start building our lineups together for SuperDraft.
I love it. Let's do it. I'm in.
Also, Zeller now has 2 fouls, so I shouldn't have. Somebody said Zeller was crushing. I got too excited, and now we've jinxed Zeller into the bench.
This is why we don't talk about live games.
No, we do not do a tilt space here, fortunately. Greg SJ, 1.05x won't get it done on SuperDraft. I mean, I think that's so like I would agree, and I think that's sort of the logic we applied for the guard spots. At center, though, where you have Jokic, and I mean, man, that worries me a little that Gobert just has such a bigger multiplier, but I just feel like there's a little more security to Jokic. Like, I'm not worried about it getting weird. I'm not worried about him being shockingly chalky or anything, because I know what I'm getting with Jokic. But I guess, Terry, if it were a pure tiebreaker, a 4-point discrepancy between the two guys, I think is high enough where I'd still want to go Jokic. But if it were, let's say, within 2 or 3, would you want to just favor the guy who's got the higher multiplier?
Not necessarily. I mean, if it's within 2 or 3, if it's that close, then yeah, I think the multiplier can decide it, because if they put up the same game, obviously that guy's coming out ahead. If that guy puts up, 3 extra points off of his projection and the other guy falls 2 points short, now you're talking about a 5-point delta, and that gets awfully big, awfully fast with those multipliers. So yes, if it's that close, I think so. I think it makes some sense to just look at the multiplier. But in this case, I think, like you said, we took care of a lot of our multipliers in all the other positions. And outside of Gobert, there's not really anybody who's like leaping off the page as like, oh man, if I get that guy with that kind of a multiplier, like Vooch is only 115. He could kill us, but I don't think he's gonna. He's, a 10-point delta on the base point projection. It's like a 9-point delta, or I'm sorry, a 15-point delta off the Gobert projection to get to Jokic. So I just think there's enough there in the base projection that we don't really have to worry about it. That's kind of why I was enthusiastic about getting there, and that we wouldn't necessarily need a multiplier. And it's kind of like the singular center spot on FanDuel, where if we're building one of these guys in, taking a bit of a risk to get to that extra kicker, we're sacrificing the opportunity cost to get to of just building in the safety net of Nikola Jokic and his monster total that he's probably going to put up.
Yep, I think that's a fair one. And we are locked on there. No overlay in today's slate. So the tournament didn't fill, so you're going to have a better shot there and taking down the 8K up top and the 40K jump shot, as well as some prizes that are pretty solid in the 4-point play. But it is a good deal to play on SuperDraft because you're just competing against less people in these guaranteed prize pools. There are some days where there is actual overlay with a 40K guaranteed. I think they did get above the mark here, though. So good news for SuperDraft and good news for you if you use the promo code Awesemo21 on superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store. They will match your deposit up to $50 and you can play that money right away. So it is basically free money. You win it and you can keep it. And that's sort of the way it works at SuperDraft. They treat their people really well over there. So make sure to go support SuperDraft and support the Awesemo channel by playing over there. Playing on these smaller sites is a great way to build bankroll and to give yourself probably more realistic shots at winning because you just have less people competing for these top prizes. So play on SuperDraft. Terry, what are the plugs here? I feel like tomorrow you're following me and Greg with EMAC for the Live Before Lock show. So people should tune in then for our deeper dive and then your Live Before Lock, a 1-2 punch that's undisputed on Saturdays. What are the other plugs, Terry?
I think I'd have to check the schedule to be honest, but I think definitely that show. Catch my articles. I'll be writing Saturday, be writing Sunday, covering the basketball slates, and no football this weekend. Looking forward to the Super Bowl following.
And then tomorrow, if Tyler's stream drops, we're going to flog him live on the show. So tune in then. Follow at Chris Spags. Follow at DigitalB21. Follow at Tyler Xander. I think that's your handle, right, buddy? No, don't follow Tyler Xander. That's a bad idea. Don't follow him. Follow at Awesemo_com, though, and subscribe at the notification bell. We are this close to 50K subscribers. There's going to be some very big giveaways to come. We appreciate all of you guys hanging with us through the crash streams and our lineups being lit on fire. So hope you guys have a great night and a great weekend if we don't see you, and good luck.
Go get him.
Vanderbilt's not starting. Oh, boy.
Is he not?